Canadian government and media have colluded in a mass anti-Christian hate hoax that resulted in the burning of more than 80 churches. In any other circumstance, this vicious display of religious persecution would be held up as a horrendous violation of human rights, but you're not going to hear a single word from the many charities and watchdog organizations dedicated to monitoring such abuses. This pogrom against Christian churches was instigated by a wide range of Canadian elites, including Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, but the event is unlikely to get so much as a mention from pastors in the United States this Sunday. Instead, American congregations are likely to hear lectures about the evils of holding political power and the dangers of Christian nationalism, even as their brothers in Christ watch sacred places of worship burn to the ground with the approval of the secular state. The Canadian media in 2021 reported that a mass grave containing bodies of Indigenous children had been found on the grounds of a former Catholic-run government boarding school. The history around the boarding schools was already contentious, as they were known for separating Indigenous children from their communities and forcing them to attend government schools to foster cultural assimilation. The new revelation that mass graves could be present at one of the schools sent the progressive Canadian establishment into a frenzy, as it seemed to confirm all their most wild fantasies about a racial genocide perpetrated against the country's Indigenous population. There was only one problem: none of it's true. The suggestion that the bodies of 215 children were resting in a mass grave at the Kamloops Indian Residential School is incendiary and should have been handled with great caution. Any ruling class that actually cared about the stability of its country would vet such an accusation thoroughly and only address the issue after going through the painstaking process of collecting definitive evidence. But Canada is governed by unhinged leftist zealots who hate Christianity and seek to vilify their own ancestors. So, instead, the media immediately began to chum the waters with reckless repetitions of the unsubstantiated allegations. Not to be outdone by the malicious agents of the media, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau validated the anti-Christian hoax by ordering the nation's flag to be flown at half-staff and calling the incident a painful reminder of that dark and shameful chapter of our country's history on Twitter. As the resentment grew and the churches began to burn, Trudeau claimed that he understood the anger driving the terrorist attacks. Law enforcement took little to no action to prevent the religious hate crime, and the entire Canadian government seemed to tacitly approve of the conflagration as a just punishment against the Christian community. Even Pope Francis validated the hoax by traveling to Canada a year later to express his sorrow over what he described as a genocide. After spending 3 years and almost $8 million in the search to uncover mass graves at the Indian Residential School in Kamloops, no remains have been found, not a single body. Despite the complete lack of evidence, neither Trudeau nor anyone in the media has apologized. No officials have been held responsible, and in most cases, police have made no significant effort to find the arsonists. The entire campaign of anti-Christian terror has been swept under the rug by Western elites. In the United States, Christians have been largely encouraged to engage in political pacifism, told by their leaders that they should be about the work of the kingdom and not the messy business of temporal governance. The remaining vestiges of cultural Christianity were driven from American institutions by a relentless legal and media campaign over the last few decades, and many pastors have decided that retreat is the only viable option. The strategy has been an unmitigated disaster, and many Christians are starting to notice that hostility towards their faith and their families has only increased as they've relinquished power. As the faithful retreat from public life, their enemies only become more zealous. This realization has led the next generation of Christians, especially young men, to seek alternatives to the political pacifism that's dooming their faith. Incidents like the anti-Christian pogrom in Canada should make it clear that their fears are well-founded. When the media and governing institutions are purged of Christian influence, they quickly become tools of persecution against the church. But instead of understanding the dire situation that Christians find themselves in, many in the American clergy continue to see the acquisition of power as the ultimate evil. The persecution of the church is an undeniable fact of Christian history, but so is the triumph of Christendom in the West. The Progressive Project hopes to deconstruct our religious foundations so it can remake the world in its own image. Many Christian leaders would never say this out loud, but they have largely adopted the left's view of the West and treated the historical dominance of Christian culture as a source of great shame. American pastors might mention the persecution of the church in a distant nation like China, but they would never raise alarm over the anti-Christian terror campaign in Canada. Many of the clergy basically agree that their ancestors were evil people whose descendants should be held accountable. I have my own reservations about the use of the term Christian nationalism. Some of them are tactical and some of them are philosophical in nature, but the core concerns of its adherents are difficult to deny. If American Christians come to shirk the duties of leadership and ignore the realities of the political sphere, they're likely to suffer a similar fate to their Canadian brethren. Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and click like, and if you haven't subscribed yet, now is a great time to do so. If you'd like to get your broadcasts as podcasts, make sure that you go ahead and subscribe to the Auron MacIntyre Show on your favorite podcast platform, and when you do, leave a rating or a review. That always helps with the algorithm. If you'd like to get my new book, The Total State, you can do that on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or pretty much anywhere that you find books. And of course, if you want to follow me on Substack or Instagram or Twitter or Gab, if you want to get these videos on Rumble or Odyssey, the links to do all of that stuff are down below in the description. And as always, you can catch my shows and my columns at The Blaze. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll talk to you next time.